just look through the roster and you see a lot of rookies, you see a lot of guys who could potentially develop into mediocre role players, but really it's just a lot of fringe NBA players. If Joel Embiid somehow makes it back by midseason, then you actually have a kind of and only slightly below average starting lineup with all those guys in there. It's really the depth is what's going to kill them, and that's my concern with this team. But they're not concerned about it. They just want another high pick.
Well, my other concern is you have Michael Carter-Williams, who obviously they couldn't give the Rookie of the Year award to Carter-Williams because of how poorly he shot down the stretch, but. You watched him in the second game of last season against the Heat, and he killed them. He has so many different dimensions to him. He can drive, he can, steal and all that. And my concern is he's going to be stuck for 2 or 3 years on this historically crappy team. And I'm worried that this is really going to permanently alter his development. Do you have any of those concerns?
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from. And it's really weird because all these rumors were kind of coming out that Philadelphia was actually trying to trade him for something like the 8th pick in the draft. That maybe they clearly know something I don't, because not that makes zero sense. I get that Carter Williams kind of struggled down the stretch, but they gave him nothing to work with, and as a point guard kind of just left him out to dry and said, hey, either you score, no one else out here is going to really contribute. So, and now they trade Thaddeus Young and put even more of a burden on him. It just seems like they're kind of setting him up to fail, and like they almost want that. It's like they were looking for an excuse to move him at last season's draft when, as you said, this guy came out in his first ever NBA game and dominated the defending champions. He's clearly someone who I think is a long-time NBA player. He kind of brings a unique skill set, being 6'6". If he continues to work on his jumper, I think he's going to get a lot better. But as you said, this could be a permanent kind of wrench in his development. If he's forced to take a lot of shots, that's not who he is. In college, he was consistently a pass-first guy. I think his NBA ceiling is someone who averages like 11 assists a game, maybe 18 points, and is really efficient, only takes wide-open three-pointers, and that's not what they're allowing him to be. And if he continues to go down that road, I hope this isn't the case, but I could see it almost like a Gavin situation where he gets seemingly worse and worse every single season.
Mm-hmm. Because he's just learning so many bad habits, and you said that the Sixers might know something that we don't. I don't think that they do. I think that their fears are what I just expressed 2 minutes ago, that he's learning all these crappy habits and that his rookie year or his second year might be his ceiling. I think
that's so frustrating because it's entirely their fault that he's learning these bad habits.
Yeah, but I actually want to move on from that to sort of the center of the East, because there are a couple of intriguing teams that could, steal a playoff series or two, maybe push the Cavs or the Bulls to a 6 or 7 game series. Are there any sleepers that you like in this conference?
I kind of like the Atlanta Hawks. I know that's not necessarily the most popular choice. It seems like Toronto, Charlotte, and Washington are kind of the 3 teams that get most of the media love. But I'm in on Mike Budenholzer. Anytime there's a Spurs discipline that isn't whoever the Orlando coach is, he's not very good.
Jacques Vaughn.
Yeah, Jacques Vaughn. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, anytime he really seems like the most Popovichian of all the Spurs guys, in that he's really kind of developing that system and where it's really predicated on moving the ball. I know the Hawks were top 6 in the NBA on assists on the entire season, and it seems like they're just surrounding Al Horford with 3-point shooters. You got a guy like Paul Millsap, who really kind of emerged last year as someone who truly deserved the all-star spot he got in the Eastern Conference. He can shoot, he can finish inside. Jeff Teague really kind of dominated that series against Indiana. He almost single-handedly put the team on the back and led them to a win. Kyle Korver is turning into a star in his own way just because of the gravity he brings on the court and kind of his versatility and where he can get off those shots. It's just a fun team to watch with a ton of shooting. They bring in a really good rookie in Adrian Payne. I can see them kind of coming together as like kind of Spurs light in that their passing is really good. And even if they don't have the same kind of frontline talent, their system kind of wins them a bunch of games. And they're at their best come playoff time.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's see. Charlotte. Lance Stevenson. Then, do you think that that's going to have any significant effect on their offense? Do you think that he's going to be a combustible element in the locker room? Like, what are your thoughts on this? Because I know that Lance Stevenson can go in a number of different directions.
I think he's really going to be asked. Let me tell you, I think for whatever reason that Pacers situation had gotten toxic at the end. It was weird. He was struggling to have whatever reason, an incredibly stressful season kept through Stevens' antics, but I think the antics were kind of they're always there to a degree, but I think in a setting with a young team like this, they're going to be more harmless than anything else. And defensively, this team is kind of scary now because we saw Steve Clifford bring them all the way up to the sixth best defensive team in the NBA, and that was with Gerald Henderson, who's kind of a mediocre defender getting big minutes. And now you bring in Lance Stevenson, who's really a stopper for Indiana. I could see this team easily being among the top 5 defensive teams in the NBA. And then offensively, you hope Kemba Walker continues to develop. Al Jefferson really had his best season of his career. I kind of thought he was someone who deserved a little bit more All-NBA team consideration. He was really, really dominant, and I think he was set up well to dominate that Miami Heat team if he kind of stayed healthy for the playoffs. I think Charlotte's going to be really scary defensively and solid offensively, particularly if Michael Kidd-Gilchrist can kind of develop something of a jumper, which we all know he's kind of struggled with throughout his career.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm kind of whipping around the Eastern Conference here because we have, 8 or 9 minutes left before you got to head out of here. Okay. Rajon Rondo in Boston. What happens there? Go.
I think some people are too hard on Boston. Look, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. They're kind of rebuilding. But I think you have some really interesting pieces here, especially considering those 3 Nets picks you get down the line. And I don't know if you're like me. I hate to are you still a Nets fan, Slice?
I was never actually a Nets fan.
Oh,
I was
really?
never a fan of any
good.
NBA team.
Oh, well, then I don't feel bad about this. The Nets are going to fall apart over the next couple of years.
Oh, absolutely.
Infrastructure, not a whole lot of hope there. And Boston's going to reap the benefits having 3 of the Nets next, I believe, 5 or 6. I think it's next 5 now, first-round picks. And you kind of look at the Celtics roster, and a guy like Jared Sullinger really stands out. He's been playing incredibly well throughout the preseason, rebounding the ball, finishing inside, shooting the light side of the ball. I like the rookies. I think Marcus Smart's incredibly competitive, and he's going to be a really solid NBA player.
James Young, too.
It kind of seems like Rondo is going to get traded. I could definitely see a turnaround at some point in the season where he's like, look, I love Boston. I just want to stay here and lead these young guys. I think Brad Stevens is a great coach. There's a lot of young talent on this roster. There's not necessarily that depth of talent, but that's going to come over the next couple of years with those picks. I think you can be optimistic as a Celtics fan right now, and they should be a fun team to watch this year that, if nothing else, always plays hard.
Yeah, and I feel like you could possibly trade Rondo for what? You could trade him for a first-round pick, an expiring contract, and maybe 1 or 2 quality young guys. Like, the price on Rondo is still pretty high. That is a legitimate asset that Boston could use to stockpile even another pick or 2.
Right, and there's not really a logical team to go after him right now, though, because you see point guard depth has never been better throughout the NBA. It seems like 23 of the 30 teams are set year in and year out, and then those teams that aren't set don't necessarily have the assets or the desire to go after him right now when they feel like they could just potentially lock him up in free agency. So I think Boston's in an interesting dilemma. Honestly, if I had to bet on it, I don't think Rondo ends up getting traded, but we'll see.
Well, I do think that, the Celtics GM's done the right thing by not trading him so far because we saw that worked out really well with the Kevin Love deal where, don't trade him, sort of passing all of these 70 cents on the dollar offers. And then suddenly the LeBron thing happens and you get full value for him. I definitely like how that's gone down so far. Milwaukee Bucks. The team that's going to be playing 4 or 5 blocks away from me. Do you think Jabari Parker is the Rookie of the Year?
Well, okay. Well, to answer your first question, no, I'd rather bet the field. I think he's definitely the favorite going to the season. He's the most developed scorer, but he's also someone who might not quite be there athletically yet. Not that that's like a weakness in his game, but he's just throughout the preseason looked like he did have some difficulty getting off his shot at times, and he was too willing to settle for jumpers. He's someone who's going to have to get a lot of free throws, I think. If we're talking about his NBA ceiling as a Paul Pierce or Carmelo Anthony, he's an incredibly crafty player, and I think he's going to start having to use those pump fakes instead of to generate kind of fading away shots from 15, 20 feet out. If he can kind of push his game closer to the interior, I think he's going to be a really effective scorer for them. And that being said, I would still bet the field. As far as looking at Milwaukee as a whole, I think there's a lot to like here. The Greek freak, Giannis, I can't pronounce his last name, so I'm not going to attempt it.
Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, he was someone who they tried to point guard throughout Summer League, which I think is both a scary – I think it's scary for both the Bucks and the rest of the league that that's where this is going. But he's someone who – I mean, his name says it all. He's a freak of nature, incredibly athletic. He's going to have a big impact for them right away this year. O.J. Mayo's not super fat anymore. So that's almost a good thing. I'm predicting a bounce back season for Larry Sanders. I made a concerted effort to take him 10 spots ahead of his projection in my fantasy draft. I think he's going to come back and really be a dominant interior player and kind of cement this team as maybe maybe a little bit closer to getting a playoff spot than falling out of the playoffs. I mean, than being right at the bottom of the East, and that's bold considering where they were last year.
All right, moving to the Indiana Pacers. You lose Paul George for the year, trade Lance Stevenson. Do you try and tank this year to sort of try and extend your title window?
Yeah, I know Bill Simmons suggested it. Others have suggested it. There's no reason in going for it this year. Let me start off by saying it's not going to happen. Frank Vogel's an incredibly competitive guy. David West, if he stays on this team, is an incredibly competitive guy. I think it takes an injury to Roy Hibbert or just the realization that they kind of suck for management to be like, you know what, let's throw the season away. Let's maybe trade David West for a mid to late first round pick, and let's just call it a loss, and then come back next year. And I think this is, as people point out, this is a rare opportunity. When you're a contender year in, year out, you so rarely get a chance at having a top pick. And obviously, while what happened to Paul George, it clearly is never ideal. It would have been much better for them last season when there was so much depth in that draft. Coming into this draft, to really get, I think, a game changer, you have to have one of those top 4 to 5 picks because there just isn't quite the same depth. That being said, they could get a really good guy in that top 10 if they just kind of suck this year. And that's not going to be hard to do. When you look at this team, there's not really any depth there.
No offense either. None.
Yeah, no offense at all. This team, this was one of the worst offensive teams in basketball down the stretch of last season. And then you lose Paul George, who's probably one of the top 10 offensive players in basketball, and Lance Stevenson, who's really coming into his own as a smart creator and one of 2 or 3 guys on this team that can shoot. The offense is going to be ugly. Frank Vogel's going to have to do something creative, and he hasn't really shown that he's capable of that. He's an incredible defensive coach, but we've never really seen anything too exciting out of this offense other than watch Paul George and Lance Stevenson kind of create for everyone else. So unless Roy Hibbert somehow has a transcendent season, which I think after that end of the year run, no one's really betting on. I'm betting on him kind of being back to what he was, but definitely not making a leap for any reason. I don't see why the team could potentially be good. I think the only solution they have is to try to get one of those top 5 picks and just sort of suck.
All right, so you have like 2 or 3 minutes before you go. I just want to get your opinion on 2 more things. 1, your favorite team, the New York Knicks. How are they doing?
The New York Knicks are kind of in a state of flux right now. They have Derek Fisher come in. I'm very upset that they didn't get Steve Kerr. Now I know why. For anyone, we'll talk about it later on. But for anyone who's kind of why Golden State all the most fluid passing team in the state, triangle and set. This is going to be interesting. It's never really worked. His assistant Brian Shaw, Kurt Rambis, it's never been effective when it has been Phil Jackson coaching the triangle. And now you clearly have Jackson involved. He's there on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure he's helping Derek Fisher out in every capacity possible. But you still have a guy who's starting at times for a title contender last year as now your head coach. And I think it's going to be an adjustment period for Derek Fisher. And the Knicks roster really isn't conducive to the triangle. It's ideally run by a number of good passers. I think Jose Calderon was a big signing for them. He's kind of an ideal triangle point guard, at least on the offensive end, with his ability to hit open jumpers and his unselfishness. Carmelo Anthony is the normal, I guess, stereotypical star scorer you need for the offense to function. But then you have so much unselfishness I wanted to say selfishness at these other positions with guys like Amari Stoudemire or J.R. Smith. Even Tim Hardaway is a little bit of a chucker for as much as I like him. I don't see it ending well, Slice. I think this team finishes just out of the playoffs, and that constitutes a disappointment for the way they're talking in the preseason.
And finally, give me your 8 playoff teams in the East. Let's rank them. We have Cleveland 1, Chicago 2. That's sort of a given.
Cleveland, Chicago, and then I'm going to go Toronto, Washington, Charlotte, Atlanta, and then I'm going to go Brooklyn, and I'm going to go Miami, and then Brooklyn.
Miami, then Brooklyn. You have Indiana missing out entirely.
I don't think Indiana. I think Indiana is one of the 3 worst teams in the Eastern Conference.
Really? All right.
Because even I think one of Orlando and Milwaukee kind of makes a leap. Because even though you saw Orlando kind of get blown out last night, they were both teams with actually a ton of young talent. And this Indiana team, when you just look up and down the roster, it's hard to contemplate that this team was really just 2 wins away from it might have been 3 wins away from the finals last year. Because they really do not have a lot of talent. I think Indiana is one of the bottom 3 teams in the East.
All right, so that concludes part 1, Eastern Conference. Be sure to check back later for part 2, where we break down the West. Gavin Shaw, I know you got class. I've got class in about an hour, so we will see you later tonight. This is Andrew and Gavin's NBA